Life is lived on a sapphire edge, sharp and beautiful, where one single choice can change the course of your destiny forever. Experience the intense cinematic drama of those who dared to walk the line between greatness and total disaster. Subscribe now and stay on the edge with us.
My accountant had worked with me for 22 years. She'd seen me through my wife's illness, through 3 recessions. Through the years, I built Greer Civil Solutions from a 2-man crew into a company with 40 employees and contracts across 4 counties. Patricia Holloway did not call me on a Wednesday afternoon unless something was wrong. "Walter, I need you to come in tomorrow morning," she said. Her voice was flat, deliberate, the way she spoke when numbers weren't adding up. "Don't mention this to Marcus. Please. Just come alone." I was standing in my garage in Brentwood, Tennessee, sorting through equipment I'd been meaning to organize for 6 months. Retirement had given me too much time and not enough purpose. The phone felt heavy in my hand. "Patricia, what's this about?" "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I'll explain everything then." "I'm sorry to be vague, Walter. I just need you to trust me one more time." She'd earned that trust 100 times over. I said I'd be there and set the phone down on my workbench. From inside the house, I could hear the television Danny had left blaring since noon. Some sports channel he'd discovered the week he moved in, and apparently decided was a permanent fixture of my living room. I stood there for a moment in the quiet of the garage, listening to the faint noise coming through the walls, and felt something I couldn't name settle into my chest. Not quite dread, something closer to recognition. I'd built Greer Civil Solutions over 31 years. Grading contracts, drainage systems, infrastructure work for developers and municipalities across Middle Tennessee. My older son Marcus had joined the company 7 years ago, working his way up to operations manager. I'd thought he was learning the business to carry it forward. I'd thought a lot of things. That evening, Marcus called. He called most evenings, which used to feel like devotion, and lately felt like surveillance. "Hey, Dad, how's the equipment audit going?" "Fine," I said. "Slow work. You should let me handle that stuff. You're supposed to be retiring." He laughed, easy and warm. Marcus had always been easy and warm. His wife Diana was the same way, gracious at dinner tables, attentive at family gatherings, asking about my health with an interest that never quite reached her eyes. "I'll manage," I said. "Diana and I were thinking we'd come by Sunday. She wants to bring that casserole you like." "That's fine." We talked for another few minutes about nothing in particular and hung up. I sat in my kitchen eating reheated soup while Danny's girlfriend Tara laughed at something in the guest room they'd been occupying for 2 years and 8 months. "Temporary," Danny had said when he moved in after losing his apartment lease. "Just until we get back on our feet." He was 31 years old. His feet had been under my roof for almost 3 years. I went to bed without sleeping much. Patricia's office was in a building near downtown Franklin, a small practice she'd run since leaving a larger firm 20 years ago. I'd followed her there from the bigger firm because she was meticulous and honest, and those 2 qualities are rarer in combination than people think. Her assistant nodded me in without a word. Patricia was standing when I entered, not sitting at her desk, standing near the window with a folder in both hands, the way a person holds something they're reluctant to set down. "Walter, sit down. Do you want coffee?" "No." "Tell me what you found." She sat across from me and opened the folder. 3 weeks ago, Marcus asked me to compile documentation for the business valuation you requested. When I pulled everything together, I found discrepancies in the operating account going back approximately 14 months. I leaned forward. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Transfers," she said carefully. "Regular transfers from the Greer Civil operating account to a personal account I didn't recognize. When I traced it, the account belongs to Marcus and Diana jointly." She slid a sheet across the desk, column after column of dates and dollar amounts. Small enough not to trigger immediate flags. Large enough to matter. 14 months, Walter. $112,000. The number sat in the air between us. "He's a signatory on the operating account," I said, because I needed to say something logical. "He is. But you're the sole owner of record. Signatories can process business expenses. They cannot transfer funds to personal accounts without authorization. I checked your signature on the authorization forms. She pulled another sheet from the folder. Walter, this is your signature on 3 of the transfer authorizations. And this, she slid a second page beside it, is your actual signature from documents you signed in my office 8 months ago. She let me look at them side by side. They're not the same person's handwriting. My throat tightened. He forged my signature. I believe so, yes. I'm not a forensic document examiner, but I've looked at your signature for 22 years. That's not it. She folded her hands on the desk. There's something else. I waited. I did some additional research after I found the transfers. Marcus registered a business entity 6 months ago. Greer Development Solutions, LLC. Similar name. Different ownership. Him and Diana. 50-50. She slid a printout across the desk. Secretary of State Business Registration. Marcus Allen Greer and Diana Lynn Greer. Registered agents. I cross-referenced his contact list against your client files. Walter, he's been meeting with 4 of your 5 largest contractors. I found emails, forwarded from his company account. He forgot he'd CC'd the general inbox. I picked up the printout and held it without reading it. He's been building a competing company, I said, using my clients, my contacts, my 30 years of relationships, and your money to fund it, Patricia said quietly. I think, when you announce the retirement sale, his plan is to position Greer Development Solutions as the natural successor. Clients who've worked with Marcus directly for 7 years may follow him without much persuasion. He doesn't need to steal the company. He just needs you out of it while he's already established. I set the paper down. The chair under me felt very solid and very far away at the same time. You called me, and not him, I said. You built this company, Walter. It's your life's work. And the forgeries are a crime. She looked at me steadily. I'm sorry. I went back and forth for a week before I called. But I would want to know. I drove home on autopilot. 35 minutes of interstate I barely registered. The Brentwood house came into view. The house where I'd raised both boys after their mother died. The house I'd worked 14-hour days to keep and improve, and eventually own free and clear. Danny's car was in my driveway. It was 11:30 on a Thursday morning, and Danny's car was in my driveway because Danny had not held a full-time job in 14 months. I sat in my truck for a while before going inside. Danny was on the couch. He looked up from his phone when I came in, offered the half-wave he'd developed as a greeting, and looked back down. Tara was somewhere upstairs. I could hear her moving around. You're back early, Danny said. It was a short meeting. I walked through to my office, closed the door, and called an attorney. I'd gotten Robert Callahan's name from a business associate 2 years earlier. Estate planning, asset protection, family law. I'd never needed him. I needed him now. His assistant put me through in 20 minutes. Mr. Callahan, I said, I need to meet with you as soon as possible. I have a situation involving my business, my estate, and 2 of my family members. I need to understand my options before I say anything to anyone. He had an opening the following afternoon. I took it. That night, Marcus called again. I let it go to voicemail, listened to him say he was just checking in, that Diana was looking forward to Sunday, that he hoped the audit was going well. His voice was easy and warm, the same as always. I deleted it. I sat at the desk in my office for a long time, pulling up bank records, contract files, email threads, building a picture from pieces I'd been too trusting to examine. The $112,000 Patricia had found. A company registration dated 6 months ago. Client meetings I hadn't known about. 7 years of trusting my son with access to what I'd built, and he'd been dismantling the foundation the whole time. Tara walked past my office door and knocked lightly. She did this sometimes, performing a version of consideration that never came with rent payments. Walter? Danny and I are ordering Thai. Do you want anything? No, I said. Thank you. She said something cheerful and walked away. I heard her tell Danny I seemed tired. Danny said I'd probably overdone it in the garage. They didn't lower their voices because they'd stopped thinking of me as someone who paid attention. Robert Callahan's office occupied the top floor of a building in Green Hills. He was in his mid-50s, unhurried, the kind of lawyer who let silence do work for him. I spread everything on his desk. Patricia's documentation, the forged signature comparison, the business registration, the email threads showing Marcus meeting with my clients, everything I'd assembled in 36 hours of barely sleeping. He read carefully, asked 3 specific questions, made notes in a legal pad with small, precise writing. The forgeries alone give you grounds for criminal complaint, he said. But I suspect that's not your primary concern. I want to protect what I built. I want to make sure that when I sell the company, the proceeds go where I intend them to go. And I want to make sure a competing business my son constructed using my money and my relationships doesn't benefit from my exit. Callahan nodded. Then we do 2 things simultaneously. First, we establish an irrevocable trust that captures your personal assets, the house, your investments, your retirement accounts. Your daughters-in-law and sons receive only what you specifically designate and cannot challenge the structure if executed properly while you're demonstrably competent. Second, we work with your attorney of record on the business side to document the unauthorized transfers before you alert Marcus. The moment he knows you know, assets may move. How quickly can we document? Patricia is already your documentation. I'll contact a forensic accountant today to formally authenticate the signature discrepancy. That takes 72 hours. Meanwhile, I'd like to file the trust structure this week. He looked at me evenly. And your younger son, the one living in your home. Is there a lease agreement? There's nothing in writing. Then he's a guest who's overstayed a welcome. Tennessee law requires a 30-day written notice for guests without rental agreements. I can have that notice drafted by Friday. Something in my chest loosened slightly. Draft both. He pulled a yellow legal pad across the desk and started writing. I watched him work and thought about the 22 years Patricia had sat with my financial life. The 31 years I'd poured into a company, the 14-hour days, the bids I'd sweated over, the employees I'd kept on payroll through slow seasons because I felt responsible for their families. I thought about the moment my older son had looked at all of that and decided it was easier to take than to build. I signed the engagement agreement and left with a copy. The drive home took 20 minutes. I used them to think about Sunday's dinner, which Marcus and Diana had already confirmed. I thought about timing. I thought about what I needed to know before I showed my hand. Saturday morning I went to my bank. Different branch than the one Marcus used for business. I sat with a manager named Elise and asked her to pull 18 months of the operating account history, printed, certified copies. She ran it in 20 minutes. I sat in the parking lot with a stack of paper and went through it line by line. The pattern was precise. Transfers on the 15th of each month, varying amounts between 6 and 12,000, always described in the memo field as equipment procurement, intercompany transfer. The description was close enough to legitimate to pass a casual review. It was careful. It was planned. I thought about my son sitting across from me at holiday dinners, asking how the retirement planning was going, whether I'd set a timeline for the sale. He'd been asking for 2 years. I'd thought he was curious about his future with the company. He'd been asking because he needed to know how long he had. My phone buzzed. Danny. I let it ring. When I got home, Danny was in the kitchen making lunch. And Tara was at my dining room table with her laptop and paperwork spread across the surface I'd bought for family meals. She'd turned my dining room into her home office. I stood in the doorway and looked at this for a moment. Sorry. Is this in the way? Tara asked, not moving anything. It's fine, I said, and went to my office. That evening I heard them through the floor. Danny's voice, then Tara's, the cadence of a conversation they thought was private. I opened my door and stood in the hallway near the bottom of the stairs. Marcus says the sale timeline is probably spring, Danny was saying. Once the old man commits to a date, we can figure out our next move. What's our ask? Marcus thinks he'll offer us something to get us out of the house without a fight. Easier than an eviction. He said Dad's a softie about family stuff. We just have to make sure we're still here when the money comes in. Tara's voice dropped. What if he sells faster than expected? Then we accelerate. Tell him Tara's looking at nursing programs. That we have a plan. Buy ourselves 6 more months. He wants to believe we're trying. I walked back to my office, sat down at my desk, and did not move for a long time. Marcus and Diana arrived Sunday at 5 with a casserole dish and a bottle of wine. Diana hugged me at the door, warm and practiced. Marcus shook my hand and clapped my shoulder the way men do when they're performing closeness. Danny and Tara came down from upstairs, and the 5 of us settled into the comfortable theater of a family dinner. Diana served. Marcus poured wine. Tara complimented the casserole she hadn't made. Danny offered to help with dishes in the vague way that meant he wouldn't. Marcus waited until dessert. Dad, we've been thinking. The timing on the sale could work out really well for all of us. Diana and I have been talking to a couple of the contractors about a transition structure, making sure the client relationships stay intact. Which contractors? I asked. He named 2 of the 4 Patricia had identified. His expression didn't shift. Just preliminary conversations, making sure there's a soft landing. Without telling me, I didn't want to get ahead of things. Easy smile. I know you like to move carefully. Diana reached over and touched my hand. We just want the transition to be smooth, Walter. For everyone. I looked at my older son across the table I'd sat at for 30 years. The table where his mother and I had helped him with homework, celebrated his graduations, welcomed Diana when he brought her home. I looked at my younger son beside him, who had moved into my guest room with promises he'd stopped maintaining 2 years ago. I know, I said. We'll talk more about the timeline. After they left, I sat in my kitchen alone. The house was quiet except for the television Danny had turned back on before going upstairs. I picked up my phone and texted Callahan. Documents ready Monday. Trust filing this week. Eviction. Notices. By Friday. He replied in 10 minutes. Confirmed. We're ready when you are. I turned off the kitchen light and sat in the dark for a while, not because I was sad, but because I was thinking clearly for the first time in months. Maybe longer. And I wanted to hold on to that clarity. The trust documents arrived Thursday morning by courier. 32 pages. Callahan walked me through everything by phone. My house transferred to trust management. Investment accounts, retirement funds, the proceeds from the eventual business sale, all designated per my specific instructions. Minimum legal distribution to my sons, the remainder to 3 charities I'd supported for years, and a scholarship fund I'd decided to establish in my wife's name at the university she'd attended. I signed every page at the kitchen table while Danny and Tara slept upstairs. Friday, 2 envelopes arrived from Callahan's office. I set them on my desk and went about my morning. At 10 o'clock, I walked into the living room, where Danny was watching something on the television he'd claimed as his own, and set his envelope on the coffee table. He looked at it. What's this? A 30-day notice to vacate. You and Tara need to find other housing. The notice is legal and effective immediately. He picked it up and read the header. His face went through several expressions in rapid sequence. Dad, come on. What is this? It's what I said it was. You're kicking us out? We live here. You've been guests without an agreement for 2 years and 8 months. Tennessee law is clear. We're family. His voice shifted. Hurt layered over something sharper. You can't just hand us a legal notice. I just did. I turned toward the hallway. 30 days, Danny. This is because of Marcus, isn't it? He stood up. Whatever's going on with you two, don't take it out on us. That's not fair. I looked at my younger son. I looked at him the way I'd looked at those bank records, line by line. I heard you and Tara talking last Saturday night, about staying until the sale money came in, about telling me Tara was in nursing programs to buy more time. The color drained from his face. 30 days, I said again. and walked to my office. The noise from upstairs started 20 minutes later. Tara's voice, urgent. Danny's, defensive. Then phone calls. Voices dropping when they remembered I could hear through the floor. I opened my laptop and sent Patricia a message confirming that the forensic accountant had been contacted and asking her to prepare the documents Callahan needed. I worked for 3 hours. When I came out for lunch, they were at the kitchen table in tense, whispered conversation that stopped when I walked in. I made a sandwich, poured a glass of water, and ate standing at the counter while they watched me. "Dad," Danny said finally, "can we at least talk?" "About what?" "About all of this. About why you're doing this." I set down my sandwich. "You told Tara the plan was to wait until the money came in. Marcus said I was a softie about family. You were counting on that being true long enough to benefit you." I looked at him. "I was a softie. I'm not anymore." I finished my lunch and went back to my office. 3 days later, Marcus called. He'd heard from Danny. His voice had changed, the warmth stripped back to something harder and less practiced. "Dad, we need to talk about what's happening. Come to dinner on Thursday," I said. "Bring Diana." A pause. "Just dinner? Thursday at 6. "I'll cook." He agreed, because he was still calculating what I knew and what I didn't. I spent the following days preparing. Not the dinner, though I did that too. I spent the days organizing documentation in a folder that I set at the head of the table where my plate would go. Marcus and Diana arrived Thursday, dressed for a conversation that might need to be charmed through. Diana brought flowers. Marcus was solicitous, asked about my week, complimented the house, did everything right. I served dinner and let them perform through the salad and most of the main course. Then I reached for the folder. "Before we get to what you came to discuss," I said, "there are some things I need to show you." Marcus's expression became careful. Diana's smile held, but her eyes changed. I slid the first sheet across. The transfer records. 14 months. Column by column. $112,000 moved from the Greer Civil operating account to your joint account. Patricia found it 3 weeks ago. A forensic examiner has since confirmed that the signatures on the authorization forms are not mine. The table was very quiet. "Marcus," Diana started. "Diana," I said, not unkindly, "you're listed as co-owner of Greer Development Solutions, registered 6 months ago. You've had meetings with 4 of my largest contractors. I have the emails." Marcus set down his fork. The warmth was gone entirely now. What was underneath it was something I recognized as calculation without sentiment. "Dad, let me explain the context. I've also set up an irrevocable trust. My house, my accounts, the sale proceeds from the business. Everything is protected and distributed per my instructions. You'll receive what Tennessee law requires, and nothing additional." I closed the folder. The forensic evidence of the signature forgeries has been provided to my attorney. Whether I pursue a criminal complaint is a decision I haven't made yet. That decision will be influenced by how this conversation goes. "You'd have your own son arrested." Diana's voice had gone flat. I'd hold my son accountable for taking $112,000 from a business I spent 31 years building. I looked at Marcus. "I taught you to build things, not to take them." Marcus stared at the table. He had nothing prepared for this, because he'd believed Danny's assessment that I was a softie, that I moved carefully, that I'd want family harmony badly enough to pay for it. "I want you both to leave," I said. "I'm not interested in a scene. The documents speak for themselves, and my attorney has copies of everything. Whatever you decide to do next, do it with an understanding of what I have and what I'm prepared to use it for." Marcus stood. Diana picked up her purse. At the door, he turned back once, and I saw something in his face I hadn't expected. Not anger. Something more honest than anger. "I didn't think you'd actually look," he said. "I know," I said. "That was a mistake." They drove away, and I stood at my front door for a while, looking at the quiet street. My neighborhood. My house. Mine. I cleaned up the dinner dishes and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of decaf and Callahan's number on my phone. I texted him, "Dinner done. Everything disclosed. Waiting to see their next move before deciding on criminal complaint." He replied, "Trust is finalized and filed. You're protected. Get some sleep." I did, for the first time in weeks. The eviction deadline fell on a Tuesday. Callahan accompanied me. A Williamson County Sheriff's deputy named Hartley, who had the patient, practiced manner of a man who'd done this work for many years, arrived at the same time. I knocked on my own door. Tara answered. She'd clearly been crying that morning. Behind her, the living room looked like they'd started packing, stopped, started again. Garbage bags, half filled with clothes. Danny standing near the couch with his arms crossed in the posture of a man who had decided defiance was easier than honesty. "Mr. Greer," Deputy Hartley said calmly. "My name is Deputy Hartley. I'm here to enforce a legal eviction order that was properly served 30 days ago. You folks need to collect your personal belongings. You have 2 hours." "This is insane." Danny looked at me. "Dad, come on, this has gone too far." 2 hours, Hartley repeated. "Clothes, personal items, nothing belonging to the property." They packed in the way people pack when they've spent 30 days hoping it won't actually happen. Frantically and inefficiently, Tara crying quietly, Danny muttering, both of them occasionally glancing at me the way they'd been glancing at me for months, waiting for the softness to surface and save them. It didn't surface. An hour and 40 minutes later, they carried the last bags to Danny's car. At the curb, Tara looked at me. "I hope you're happy with yourself." I said nothing. Danny got in the car without looking back. They drove away. Deputy Hartley handed me paperwork. "If they return without your permission, call us. That's criminal trespass." He shook my hand with the brief practicality of a man who'd seen this go many ways and appreciated when it went quietly. Callahan stood beside me in my driveway in the Tuesday morning sun. "How do you feel?" "Like my house is mine again," I said. He smiled at that. 2 weeks later, I was having coffee on my back porch when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number, but a Tennessee area code. "Walter Greer?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "This is Patricia Holloway." I almost laughed. "Patricia, I know your voice. What are you calling from a different number for?" "My office phone is in for repairs." A pause. "I've been thinking about how everything turned out. I wasn't sure if I should call. It's not really my business." "You made it possible," I said. "You did the right thing. I want you to know that." She was quiet for a moment. "I've been doing books for a lot of businesses for a long time, Walter. I've seen families that worked well together and families that didn't. The ones that don't always seem so sure nobody's paying attention." "They were very sure," I said. "Are you doing all right?" "Really?" I looked out at the backyard, the yard I'd regraded myself 23 years ago using equipment from my own company. The dogwood in the corner my wife had planted the year before she got sick. The fence I'd replaced board by board one summer when the boys were teenagers and complained about the work, and then felt proud of it afterward. "I'm doing better than I have in years," I said honestly. "The house is quiet. The business is being sold to a buyer who doesn't have my last name, which turns out to be the right decision. I'm sleeping." Patricia laughed at that. "Good. Sleep is underrated." "It is." I set down my coffee. "Patricia, would you be willing to have lunch sometime? Not about business. Just lunch." Another pause, shorter this time. "I'd like that, Walter. I really would." "Next week?" "Next week." We said goodbye, and I stayed on the porch for a long time. The dogwood was starting to flower. My wife had planted it because she said a yard needed something that bloomed in its own time without being told to. She'd been right about most things. Marcus had left a voicemail 2 days after the dinner. His voice had none of the practiced warmth left in it. Just exhaustion. He said he understood what he'd done and that he didn't expect forgiveness. He said he'd returned what he could to the business account, about 40,000 of the 112, and that the rest was gone into the LLC he was now dissolving. He did not ask for anything. I listened to the voicemail 3 times, looking for the angle, and didn't find one. I saved it and called Callahan. We agreed to defer the criminal complaint decision for 60 days while Marcus continued repayment. Not forgiveness. Not restoration. A practical arrangement with clear terms. Danny called once and left a message saying he was working and that Tara had enrolled in an actual nursing program, not the invented one, and that he wanted me to know. I listened and set the phone down. I hadn't called back yet. Maybe I would. The 31 years I'd poured into that company were gone from my daily life now, and I had found that the absence of obligation created space I hadn't known to want. On Wednesday mornings, I volunteered at a Habitat for Humanity site 2 towns over, doing foundation work, the kind of labor my back had earned the right to complain about and refused to. The site supervisor was a woman named June, who'd been running builds for 15 years and did not tolerate inefficiency or self-pity and laughed loudly at her own jokes. I had started looking forward to Wednesdays. On Thursday evenings, I played poker with 3 men from my old Rotary chapter, at least one of whom cheated in ways too affectionate to object to. On Sunday mornings, the house was mine. In the way a house is only yours when there's no one else in it with an agenda. The business sale closed 6 weeks later. The buyer was a regional civil engineering firm that had been trying to acquire Greer Civil Solutions for 3 years. I'd always said no because I'd assumed Marcus would want to carry it. I signed the paperwork in a conference room downtown and shook hands with people who understood what 31 years of work looked like because they'd done the same kind of work themselves. The proceeds went into the trust. Protected. Designated. Finished. I drove home through Nashville afternoon traffic and pulled into my garage and sat in the truck for a moment before going inside. I'd built something. I'd protected it. I'd made my choices about where it would go, and no one could change them now. My phone showed a text from Patricia. Lunch on Tuesday still good? There's a new place on Main Street I've been wanting to try. I typed back. Tuesday is perfect. I went inside. The house was quiet. The way I'd once been afraid a house could be. The way I understood now as something else entirely. Not emptiness. Not loss. Just the sound of a life that belonged to the person living it. On my kitchen counter sat the guitar I'd bought the week after the eviction. I was 3 lessons in and not good yet. The instructor told me that wasn't the point at the beginning. The point at the beginning was just to show up and make the effort and trust that the rest would follow. He wasn't wrong, I thought. About most things, that's exactly how it works. I picked it up and sat at the kitchen table in the late afternoon light and played the 3 chords I knew, badly, quietly, without anyone listening. My house, my noise, my time. I had built a good life once. I was building a different one now. And for the first time I could remember, I had no doubt it would hold.